Gloria in excelsis Deo.
In the 28th canto of Dante Alighieri's Inferno, Dante's depiction of hell features the circle of the fraudulent, which includes those who are guilty of the moral crime of schism. And there we find someone you might not expect, namely the founder of Islam, Muhammad. Why does Dante put this man here, since he's not even a Christian? Why does Dante categorize Muhammad as a divider of the church when he's not in the church? And what does this reveal about the Christian mindset in relation to Islam versus other more recently founded religions, for example, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also called Mormons? When looking at these two world religions of Islam and Mormonism, there's a lot of comparisons we can make between these two sects. Both of their founders claimed to receive their doctrines from an angelic presence, preaching to them a new and purportedly uncorrupted gospel. They both claimed to be God's chosen prophets, and both saw large growth in their respective national and regional spheres through rapid territorial expansion. Yet Islam is thought of today mostly for its role as a great enemy of Christian civilization, and rightly so, since Christian Europe was nearly lost to Muslim hordes on multiple occasions. For example, when they seized control of the entirety of Spain in the 700s, and it took nearly 500 years to extract them. By comparison, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints seems like an ally of Christianity. After all, they're widely known as a friendly and hardworking people. They put Jesus in the official name of their organization, and they baptize in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Whereas Muslims not only do not baptize at all, but very explicitly reject the Trinity and deny that Jesus is God. So given all of that, why is it that Muslims believe in the true God, but LDS adherents do not? To give you a clear roadmap of where I'm going with this, it's important to understand that Islam is a Christian heresy, whereas Mormonism is properly speaking a form of atheism. English thinker Hilaire Belloc, a contemporary and friend of G.K. Chesterton, devoted a chapter to Islam in his book, The Great Heresies, which I think is very helpful in understanding Islam as a heresy. Belloc notes that this identity as heresy is the essential point to grasp before thinking about Islam, because it was not a pagan contrast with the church, it was not an alien enemy, it was a perversion of Christian doctrine. For Belloc, Islam is a religion that is founded on oversimplification of Christian thought, like many heresies. However well or poorly these doctrines were explained to Muhammad to start with, the camel driver turned prophet did not understand the theological importance of things like the Trinity or transubstantiation or sacraments in general. And whatever he could not understand, he either simplified or discarded. Yet even so, Muhammad retained much more of the Christian truth than we might be inclined to give him credit for. Belloc notes that Muhammad took over very few of those old pagan ideas which might have been native to him. He preached and insisted upon a whole group of ideas which were peculiar to the Catholic Church and distinguished it from the paganism which it had conquered in the Greek and Roman civilization. Among these ideas, we can look to things like the unity and omnipotence of God, God's personal nature, supreme goodness, timelessness, providence, God's creative power as the sole origin of the universe, and how all things are contingent upon God's divine will, as well as various doctrines concerning the immortality of the soul, just reward after death, and even an exalted view of Mary, trending towards a theology of the Immaculate Conception. For all of these reasons, Pope St. Gregory VII was comfortable addressing the Muslim king Anzir with the greeting, "This affection we and you owe to each other in a more peculiar way than to people of other races, because we worship and confess the same God." Yes, of course, Muslims are not Christians, they don't baptize and they don't accept the Trinity, but they do worship the true God, even while rejecting important and even salvific aspects of who he has revealed himself to be. Consider something like Justin Martyr's first apology. If a church father like Justin Martyr was able to call a real pagan like Socrates a Christian in some sense, then how much more credence should we be willing to give to the sincere monotheism of the Islamic sect, even though it has undeniable and even damnable aspects to its theological framework? If we can give so much latitude to the Muslims, who have done so much harm to Christians everywhere for 14 centuries, why can we not give the same latitude to adherents of the LDS religion? Let's circle back to the issue of baptism, which serves as a great focal point for the problems with Mormonism. In 2001, the Congregation, now Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, released a brief negative response to the question of whether or not Mormon baptisms are valid, which is to say, whether or not they really give grace and forgive original sin. This was followed by 2 explanatory articles released in the Vatican newspaper La Osservatore Romano in order to help understand why this decision was reached. To put the issue in technical language, a valid baptism requires valid matter, form, intention of the minister, and disposition of the recipient, but only the first aspect, matter, the use of water, matches with a Christian minimum for the ordinary form of this sacramental reality. The essential reason that LDS baptisms are ineffectual is that everything that a Mormon means when they say the words, "I baptize you in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit," is entirely different from what a Christian means by those words, in essentially every aspect. Firstly, the ministers of this sacrament do not intend to forgive original sin, and make one a part of the new covenant with God, established by Jesus Christ. Rather, Mormon theology does not believe in original sin and the transmission of the fault of Adam. It also does not believe that baptism forms an indelible mark upon the soul, but rather that it must be repeated if one leaves the LDS faith. The second major issue is that Mormons do not believe in the Trinity. At first glance, this might seem to be a situation akin to Arianism. After all, Arius denied the eternal coexistence of Jesus Christ, and thus did not ascribe to him full divinity. Yet when the Arians baptized, the Church continued to believe that those baptisms were valid. But the difference here is that in addition to Mormons not intending to forgive original sin, there is no acknowledgement of God as the true supreme origin of all, whether God the Son, God the Father, or any other aspect of the Godhead. Although the LDS profess a belief in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, they mean a collective unity of distinct beings who share the status of the Godhead and exercise great power, but who are not actually supreme or unified. As Joseph Smith taught in the King Follett sermon, God himself was once as we are now, and is an exalted man, and sits enthroned in yonder heavens. And my Father worked out his kingdom with fear and trembling, and I must do the same. Thus Smith denies that the being he worships is God at all. For as Malachi chapter 3 says, I, the Lord, do not change. Smith's being is a very different sort of creature than God, for he is really a creature, and he has a body through which he engages in sexual reproduction. As the Encyclopedia of Mormonism notes, LDS believe that all mankind are literally the sons and daughters of God, and that there is a heavenly consort of fourth God who bore children for her husband. Joseph Smith's deity is devoid of actual omnipotence, for he cannot create the universe in a true sense. Rather, he merely shuffles around the atoms of an existing soup. The King Follett sermon goes on to note that this God did not create out of nothing, but rather organized the same as a man would organize materials and build a ship, which is directly contrary to the words of 2 Maccabees, which say, Look at the heavens and the earth and see all that is in them. Then you will know that God did not make them out of existing things. From all this, it should be clear that Mormonism is not a form of Arianism, nor anything like Christianity at all. And it is not even a form of simple monotheism with a vestigial Christian connection such as Islam. Some might be willing to call LDS theology a kind of paganism, with its pantheon of gods, but even that is ultimately too generous a description. Ultimately, the most singularly damning aspect of Mormon theology is that it is a form of materialism. In nearly every culture across all times and places, there is an acknowledgement of at least 2 forms of reality, namely spirit and matter. Mormonism sometimes claims to follow in this tradition, yet like all the rest of its teachings, Mormonism uses true words to speak error, for they again deny what a Christian or even many pagans mean by the word spirit. For the LDS, spirit is itself a kind of very fine matter, but it is not non-matter. Doctrine and Covenants 131 from the LDS website plainly says, there is no such thing as immaterial matter. All spirit is matter, but it is more fine or pure, and can only be discerned by purer eyes. We cannot see it, but when our bodies are purified, we shall see that it is all matter. For this reason, the fairest and most accurate description of LDS theology is that it is a form of atheism, for its multiple deities are not deities, even according to its own understanding. They are more like superheroes who wield a real power, but not one which makes a real change beyond the physical order, for the LDS do not acknowledge anything beyond the physical order. Now, does this mean that every individual Mormon is personally an atheist? No, I would not say so. As Article 36 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church notes, all mankind are created in God's image and likeness, and therefore the true God, who is the first principle and last end of all things, can be known with certainty from the created world by the natural light of human reason. Because of this, it is always possible for us to be open to the workings of God in our lives, no matter what may be the cultural or religious context in which we are brought up. But it is the case that the more a person learns about and accepts Mormon theology, the further they are from the true God. I made this video in part to counter the modern category error that I sometimes see Christians make, which denies the existence of basic monotheism after the incarnation. The reality is that God makes himself available to the hearts of mankind in all times and places, even before divine revelation, and we must always be aware of the image of God in our fellow man, in our dialogue with and evangelization to them. Thanks for watching.